Hello, hello. I am Diana Grant. I am the leader of a love revolution, and my message is self. Welcome to my couch. Welcome to Self Love Friday. Today I'm going to speak about loss and grief and recovering joy after a loss. Grief has so many faces and comes in so many different forms. People say that uh, often there's a conception that grief only happens in the loss of a life, the loss of a loved one, the loss of a pet. But there are other ways that life forces us to grieve, and so often we don't. It could be the loss of a job or a career, the end of a career, retirement. It could be grieving the death of a relationship or a friendship. Grief can come when we lose our home, when we are pushed into moving away from a place where we found our safety. Friendships come to end, relationships come to an end, jobs come to an end. All of these things bring loss, and loss needs to be grieved. So often, I find for myself and for everybody that I speak to that we have this sense that we don't we don't get to. We need to move on. We need to be strong. We need to back up. What's the saying? Pull on your big girl panties and keep going. Well, that's all good and well. And anyone who knows me knows that I'm an advocate for positivity and positive mindset. However, it's very difficult to maintain a positive mindset of authenticity when you're not allowing yourself to have the emotions that are real for you in the moment. And this brings me to grief and loss. When it comes to something coming to an end, it is very important to acknowledge that, to acknowledge the feelings that come with it, and to give yourself the honor of being allowed the emotions that you have, acknowledging those, giving yourself space to feel them, to see what they really are, where you can place them, before you push yourself to back up and move on, to slap a smile on it and keep going. They say grief has 5 different stages. The stages are, the first stage of grief is denial. That is such a natural human response to any big shift or change. The immediate um, reaction of our subconscious denial: this can't be true, this can't be happening. For example, I remember when my first marriage came to an end and my ex-husband and I were navigating the closure of our relationship. My reaction was, this can't be real. And that would happen every day. Every day I would wake up with the sense of, this can't really be happening. This can't be real. Surely not. We love each other. We've been through so much together. This can't be happening. And that was me in my first stage of grief, denial. At that stage, I had no idea that I was even in denial, in grief, that I had anything to grieve. I will tell you a bit more about it when I realized the grief just now. The second phase of grief, or processing a loss, is anger. And that is usually very righteous. If you think of losing a loved one, there's that anger that they're gone, the anger that you have to do life without them. When processing the end of a relationship, the anger that everything that you hoped for with that person is now not to be. When, if you've lost your job, it would be the anger of not having that role in you, the role that you might have placed your identity in. So immediately after denial comes anger. Why should this happen to me? Why should I have this experience? Why should I experience this loss? Anger, anger, anger. Out of that, usually once the anger dissipates, we move into a space of bargaining, where our subconscious immediately tries to start making a plan. Like, well, if I do this, then maybe this situation can be resolved. If when it comes to grief of something that's gone, so loss of a loved one, loss of a relationship, loss of a job, this almost seems illogical or ridiculous, but it is a natural human reaction. We start bargaining with ourselves even. If I do this, then this situation might feel better. For me, I remember thinking if I just carry on as normal, maybe they'll come back. Having lost somebody close to me, which seems like something that a crazy person would think, but it's not. It's completely natural. That bargaining, you start bargaining with your life, bargaining with yourself, coming up with, if I do this, or if I feel that, or if I say that, then the situation might shift, might change. This loss might not be real. So often at that point, you can actually slip back into the denial phase again, because it's very easy to go, well, now that I've created this bargaining, I can pretend that this situation isn't actually happening. It's not real. And then we start that cycle all over again. After bargaining, though, often depression sets in. There's this sense of, this has really happened. I don't know how to cope with it. I've tried denying it. I've been angry. I've tried bargaining. And now I feel like there's nothing I can do. I am helpless. And that depression sets in, and it's just this deep, deep feeling of helplessness. You can't change the situation, and that brings depression. Not being able to know what the next, not taking another move, because what's the point? That is real, and lots of people get very stuck there, very stuck there. Even when they go into the fifth stage of grief, which is acceptance, a lot of people stay in the depression as well. So they stay even though they're accepting, they're still depressed, and that depression can last for years. That depression can basically become a lifestyle. I remember watching my gran, whom I loved very much, but she had a really tough journey with herself and her mental health in life. And I remember watching her, she was depressed. She was depressed my whole life. None of us in the family knew the root of her depression. However, it affected all the people around her. We found out some stuff later on that made sense. They actually stuck in a space of grief for her whole life. First from the loss of her father, and then from some very difficult situations that happened in her life. And she just never made it out of the depression. She got stuck there. And what I want to talk about today is reclaiming life after loss, reclaiming joy. So when we get to the fifth phase of grief, acceptance, this is a very, very important one. I have a favorite saying that I love saying. Happiness, acceptance is route to happiness, or happiness comes through acceptance. You might think that that implies that you have to like what's happening, but it doesn't. That doesn't imply it at all. Acceptance is merely acceptance. You don't have to be happy about the situation. You don't have to like it. You don't have to have chosen it. Usually when we are grieving something, it's not something that we would have chosen for ourselves. Sometimes it is, and that can make it really hard. But acceptance doesn't mean that you say you like it. Acceptance is merely a fact that it is real, and it has happened. Hello, Olga, darling. How are you? Welcome. Thank you for being here today. So once we've accepted the reality of the situation, as I said, so often people get stuck in the grief. They get stuck in the regret around what has been lost, whether it's a loved one, whether it's a relationship, a job, a home. It's so easy to get stuck in the depression, even after we've accepted it. And here's where the self-love comes in. If you are still alive, you deserve to live. If you are still breathing, you deserve joy. You deserve happiness. And this is where the hardcore bit comes in. There is only one person who can give that to you. And that is you. And that is where self-love comes in. So how, you might think, how? How on earth can I go from this state of deep grief and sadness, depression, anger, getting back to joy? First step, give yourself permission. Giving yourself permission to live and to live with joy is the hardest part. Because subconsciously, there are thoughts of, well, that'll be betraying the loss. That'll be making it smaller. That'll be diminishing the importance of this situation. I lost a loved one, or a relationship came to an end. If I'm happy, that would deny the loss. Well, it doesn't deny the loss. The loss can be real and sad and worthy of grief, and you can still choose joy. You can still allow yourself to live in joy. So that is definitely the first step. Give yourself permission. How do you do that? Again, back to acceptance. Accepting yourself. So I see the acceptance stage as two. So it's not just accepting the situation and what has happened and the reality of it, but very, very importantly, self-acceptance. Self-acceptance here is key. Allowing yourself those stages of grief, knowing that you may very well keep going back to the beginning and starting again, that you may do that 500 times. Accept yourself in that. Accept the fact that you do have something to grieve. That's another thing I remember from my divorce, from my first husband, is being hit with the grief quite far on after the fact, because I was coping during the whole thing. And I didn't stop to think that I had anything to grieve. I was doing that thing of pull on your big girl panties and get on with it. And suddenly one day it hit me like a train that I had lost a life that I had dreamed of, a life that I'd put so many years into, a life that had hopes for it, a life that still had future ideas for it. And this loss hit me very hard, and I suddenly went into a space of grief, which was a bit of a shock for me because I wasn't expecting it. However, I was far down my journey of self-love already, and so I immediately started practicing self-acceptance. I was not as far down my road of self-love as I would have liked to, so I also went into quite deep into a lot of those emotions, but I needed to. I needed to get really angry. I needed to get to do some hard bargaining with myself. I needed to get really, really depressed. Fortunately, I didn't stay stuck there. I got to acceptance, and self-acceptance was a big part of it, a huge part of it. In fact, I would say that my divorce, although I was already down the road in my self-love journey, it kicked me into self-love first top gear, and off I had to go. Olga says, "You are so strong, Diana, our true role model and example. You're still a human being and very real." That's what matters. Thank you, Olga. Thank you. Yes, I hope so. I do try and speak from my own experience because that's really how I've learned everything I've learned. Studying is one thing, but the school of life really, really teaches us, doesn't it? So self-acceptance, as I say, is so very, very important. And thank you, Olga, for your comment, because that also brings me to a point of accepting our own story. So had you spoken to me earlier on in my life, I probably would have thought I will never get divorced and had a judgment around that. And so part of my journey of recovery was accepting my own story, accepting and being able to speak about it and own it, owning my experience and making it okay. Because the fact is, it's my reality, it's my story, I lived it, so it has to be okay. Imagine if I'm walking around trying to pretend that parts of my life didn't happen. What would that do to my psyche? That causes split. We do that. It's a natural reaction. So many of us hold secrets about ourselves. that we try not to speak of, it's not good. It's not healthy. It's a burden. So self-acceptance is so important in the self-love process, in the recovery from grief. Accept your story, accept what has happened, and accept you in that role. Then after that, this is one that I think so often self-help books and sort of positivity people will tell you to jump to this point, but with skipping the self-acceptance, and that is to look for the ruby in the dust. What is my lesson? What is my gift from the scenario? It's very easy to say that to someone, but it's not very easy to get there if you haven't gone through the self-acceptance process, if you haven't gone through the different phases of grief, knowing that you were grieving something, and then accepting yourself in that. So once you've accepted this, once you've accepted all your emotions and everything that you have around this process, then I think it's possible to look at what could I have gained from this situation? What have I learned? Or how have I grown? And scratch around through the dust and the dirt and the grime of that whole situation and find your ruby. There always is one in every single situation. Sometimes a really, really big jewel can be found in a really, really situation. And I think that loss is definitely one of those times, is when we really, really have something taken away, something that means so much to us, and we have to dig deep and come face to face with who we are, we can truly grow and we can truly find rubies. I sadly have had a number of friends leave this life whilst they were friends with me, and it's become easier to cope with because I've become so comfortable with the fact that people do die. It is, as my dad always taught me from young, it is the only thing we know when we're born, is that we will die. So with that very harsh reality, I have got used to saying goodbye to people. But it was very hard the first time, very, very hard. It was so hard. And one of the biggest ways that I coped and that I got better after the acceptance and that I didn't slip back into depression was looking for the ruby. And the ruby for me is always about what the person brought to my life, what we shared, joy that we shared, and or things that I learned from that person, or things, qualities that that person had that I maybe didn't have or didn't have to such a degree, and that has just carried me. Because now, whenever I think of a person that has passed, or a relationship that is over, or anything that I've lost, a home, I think about what was amazing about that. What was amazing about that person? What was amazing about that relationship? What was incredible about that home or that job, the company that I used to work for? So I think about all of that, and I really spend time looking at all of my jewels, and that really helps me stay positive and stay upbeat. What else? The next step for me is in getting to the journey from grief to joy. So we've gone from self-acceptance to finding the ruby in the dust. The next thing that I would say is look at yourself, go back to the mirror. You know, I'm always recommending mirror work. Go back to the mirror, look at yourself as you are post this loss, and say, who am I and what do I want? And just see yourself as you are, as raw as you are, in your loss or post your loss. You've accepted yourself. Now you get to say, who am I, or who do I want to be out of this? Because this will have added a level to who you are. This will have added new layers to your personality, to your psyche, to your heart. There's a saying that I heard once, I don't know if I read it or if I heard it in a movie, but it was that broken hearts, the hearts don't break. Hearts might get shredded and ripped apart, but they heal. And sometimes there's some scarring, but all the scarring does is make the muscle stronger. So I loved that saying, because if you know anything about gym, people who build muscle. What they're actually doing is ripping the muscle, and then the muscle grows in those rips. And that's the concept of the heart being a muscle. And I loved that. So I've had the opportunity to really work with that in my life. And each time that I've been through a loss, each time that I've had to go through these 5 stages of grief and heal myself and reclaim my joy and give myself that permission, I get to the point where I get to say, well, who am I now? And what do I want from here? How am I going to this grief experience, this loss, and turn it to good for myself in my own life? And then claim that. So once you've given yourself the permission, you've accepted yourself, you've found your jewel, then step forth in joy. Live your life. And I don't mean that in slipping back to level 2 of grief. Don't go back into denial. The grief will always visit you again. The loss will visit you again. You'll feel it. You'll feel it. It's just that once you've given yourself permission to live again, permission to claim your joy, permission to really, really be alive after your loss, then when you feel it, you will be able to manage it. You'll be able to acknowledge it. You'll be able to feel the pain, and it won't take you away into the depths of depression. You will be able to feel the sadness, feel the loss, acknowledge it, and then come through those stages of grief much faster and get to the point of looking at your jewels, looking at your rubies in the dust, seeing what you've learned, how you've grown, and how positively that relationship, job, person, pet impacted your journey. And then the gratitude comes in. And gratitude is to direct at the outside world and all the factors that are in our lives, but definitely gratitude for yourself as well. Remember you in this. You played a part in recovery. Yes, you did experience a loss, and you also recovered, and you chose to live after your loss. And there's gratitude there. Say thank you to yourself. So back to the mirror, thank yourself, accept yourself, and love yourself. I really hope that helped today. Just sharing some of my experiences and how I perceive reclaiming joy and joyful living post-loss to be. It is possible to laugh again. That's another thing. If you are grieving and you are heartbroken right now, it may not feel like it, but you will laugh again. You will love again. You will feel again. And I wish you everything of the best. I hope this helps. Give yourself some space. Accept yourself. See your jewels. And keep loving yourself. Lots of love from my sofa, and I will see you next week. Ciao for now.